My grandmother disappeared in 1981. My grandfather's never stopped looking for her. There's a tone in Mill Creek that haunts the bones, and it wanders through the trees around this town. It's taken other people too. So my grandpa and I built a machine to follow it. Strange things happen here. Murders in light, brilliance in shadows. I'm Orin, and this is Wave Glass. The most beautiful experience we can have is the mysterious. It is the fundamental emotion that stands at the cradle of true art and true science. Whoever does not know it and can no longer wonder, no longer marvel, is as good as dead, and his eyes are dimmed. Grandpa had painted these words from Einstein's essay, The World as I See It, onto the one wall in his shop not already covered with art. They were the first thing I saw from the top of the stairs. The shop was completely transformed. It was breathtaking. When had he done all of this? I was only gone 6 months. Exquisite paintings and award-worthy photographs now lined 3 of the walls, from floor to ceiling. He had used a driftwood stump to sculpt a lifelike creature of his own invention. It was huge. My grandfather had always been creative, but this was overwhelming. Every piece was in a class of its own. I walked downstairs to the shop floor, compelled to search for answers. It was late. I'd been driving for 2 days, but I needed to look around. The house seemed normal enough. Grandpa's car keys and his wallet were in the basket on the kitchen counter, just as always. His bed was made. His truck was in the driveway. Everything looked untouched, except the basement shop. When I left for school, the shop had been a mess of music gear. Cables running hither and yon, speakers of all sizes stacked on each other, evidence of our experiments with tones and their lovers, chords and harmonics. Grandpa's carving tools were tucked in one corner. His easel, oils, canvases, and art sundries lay scattered across the center of the room. It had been cluttered, lived in, and quite comfortable. Now it was a pristine gallery of museum-quality pieces. My first thought was that it would have taken him longer than 6 months just to clean it up, let alone transform it into this. In addition to the quadruped centerpiece, he'd built pillars to frame the room and set stones to mark time, each one bearing hand-carved scenes from his history and of mine. Well, I thought, I don't know what to make of this, but he's not here. I remember thinking it would be impossible to sleep that night. But when I went upstairs, stepped into my room and laid down, I was out in minutes, still feeling the sway of the road beneath me. When I woke up, I headed straight for the kitchen, first things first. Grandpa always believed in organic, single-origin beans and kept a little library of them in slender glass jars along the back of the counter. I heated some water, then savored the aroma as I waited for my pour-over to brew. Without a stove or hot plate in my dorm, I'd really missed the intricacies of this daily ritual. Good coffee finally in hand, I perched at the top of the basement stairs, taking in Grandpa's workshop again. Every piece he made looked so delicate and engaging. I couldn't help marvel at his skill. I could have stood there, eyes riveted to them, for hours, but my stomach was growling, and I needed something to eat. There wasn't much left in the fridge, a bunch of condiments, soggy greens, and a couple of eggs. I grabbed the eggs, hoping they weren't too old, and rummaged through the cabinets till I found a single can of corned beef hash. That would do. I'd hit up Tanner's Market for groceries later, then get on with my investigation. As I started cooking breakfast, I heard a faint knocking downstairs. I froze, straining to listen over the sizzling eggs and hash. Then I heard footsteps, unmistakable footsteps, on the basement stairs. My heart pounded, and my hands shook as I reached for the nearest thing, anything, to defend myself. The door creaked open, and there stood Grandpa, holding a plunger aloft like a weapon ready to strike. "Oh my God, Grandpa?" I gasped in sublime relief. "What are you doing here, Orin?" he asked, squinting against the rays of morning streaming through the kitchen windows. "I heard you bashing around up here and thought you were an intruder." I wasn't bashing. I don't understand. I said, stumbling over my words as I set down my weapon of choice, an oversized wooden salad fork. Wait, how did I not see you come in? He hesitated. My grandpa looked good, like a spark of youth was in him. Then a cat that ate the canary grin grew across his face, and he said, I suppose I have a lot to explain. Yes, you do, I shot back. What the hell is going on? What just happened? My God, where have you been? I was building up a head of steam now. Florence called me a few days ago. She said you'd been missing for at least 10 days. You skipped breakfast at the get-together, missed game night, and stood Billy up for a fishing trip. Everyone looked for you. Your stuff was here, but you were gone. I drove halfway across the country to put your affairs in order. Sheriff Hollis feared you were dead, too, or gone like the others. I sank to the floor, breathing deep, holding back tears from a budding well. Fear, relief, confusion, joy, all fighting to spill out at once. Grandpa sat down beside me and put his hand on mine. We sat quiet for a moment, reordering our thoughts. After Sylvie's disappearance, when I was still too young to be of help, my grandfather regularly returned to the place where she had fallen through the cracks in our universe. He would walk for hours amid the peace and quiet of the forest, and there he grieved. He took beautiful macro photos, meticulously documenting plants and insects to share on an online nature forum that cataloged local flora and fauna. He also searched for clues, but found none. This went on for a couple of years. He still played music, still joined friends for Friday night jams, a couple of drinks at the Branch Tap House, or breakfast at the get-together diner. But he always returned to that spot, parking at the Forest Service gate and walking. He was getting by, but in his head he wasn't living. He was stuck in a loop, orbiting Sylvie's mystery. One day, Grandpa stumbled upon a giant Pacific salamander lazing in a patch of hedgehog mushrooms nestled in the rocky soil. He pulled out his camera and knelt to get a shot of this rare, noble, and kind of adorable beast. As he focused, he noticed the mystifying quality of the sound in that place. An absence of sound, really. It seemed to vibrate. He insisted that he could feel the sound in that place. He told me that he didn't know how he knew this, but he suddenly understood that he was tramping on hallowed ground. He took off his shoes to feel the earth. He wiggled his toes in the dirt. He remembered what Sylvie had once said about this spot. It's quieter here than anywhere else in the forest. And it was. It really was. He told me how strange the air felt in that place, how the silence pressed in on him like invisible fingers. It's a silence that seems alive, a silence that moves around you, he'd said. This plot of land was mystery, and it embodied wonder. It wasn't good or evil, it just was. I knew something akin to that eerie hush. That same living stillness sank its teeth into me for the first time when I was just a kid. It wrapped itself around my chest and wouldn't let go. I remember feeling enclosed, gulping shallow, stubby breaths, as if the silent fingers interlocked around me. Just before my 10th birthday, my parents were returning from a day in the valley, shopping and running errands. For most of the highway between the valley and the coast, visibility's clear, but the climb to Soul Mountain Pass is steep and winding. A few stretches of road up there are no passing zones because hills, curves, and trees make it hard to see what lies ahead. Zeke Rigsby was notorious around here for being an aggressive piece of shit on the road. I'm not kidding. People talked about it. Hazel Bell from the diner told me that they were always coming in with stories about him. That guy in the white truck was tailgating me real close and wouldn't let up, just hollering, "Fuck you," and flipping me off. Lord have mercy, that same white Ford just blew past me on a blind curve. He's gonna flatten somebody sure as shit. Why won't Sheriff go and toss his ass in jail? Holy shit, that same asshole was riding the short bus's tail, the special needs one, then whipped right around him on a blind curve. Flipping the kids off, man. Detestable. On this day, my parents were heading west, on their way home. Zeke had just been brake-checked after tailgating 3 or 4 feet behind a gunmetal gray camper van. He cut into the oncoming traffic lane, trying to pass on the east side of the summit, and hit my parents head on. Zeke's face went through the windshield, and he was dead before he could flash his customary greeting to the driver of the van. And my folks? Sheriff Hollis brought the news. It's just been the two of us since. Grandpa brought me to his quiet place so we could walk together and grieve. We talked about the land. He taught me about the trees and the ferns blanketing the forest floor. Western sword ferns with leathery fronds. Lady ferns, dainty and delicate, and the deer fern with two kinds of fronds. One stretching flat in extended child's pose, bowing to embrace the earth, the other reaching towards the heavens. We talked about the mycelium under our feet. Grandma said mycelium is a network, he told me, a way for the plants and trees to communicate with each other and transfer resources. I'm starting to think the earth is speaking to us in a similar way, he said. Everything's connected. After your grandma went missing, I thought a lot about life and death, science, religion, he paused, and magic, just out here walking. I started pulling on threads of thought and chasing research, trying to make sense of my loss, just grasping at straws. But the more I searched, the more I found threads that were attached to something or tied together. Not just the desperate childish wishes to bring her back by traveling through time or yanking her through some quantum doorway from another dimension. He squatted to meet my eyes. Orin, he said, placing his hand on my chest. Your heart. He moved his hand to his own chest and tapped. My heart. Creation started here, in a heart. He placed his hand over mine again. This is where healing will come from. Earth to Orin, Grandpa said, pulling me out of my daze and drawing me up from the kitchen floor and into a tight embrace. We've spent, 11 years on this stuff? Experiments, reading, trying to translate those dusty old scrolls. Well, it all came together just after I got home from visiting you for Thanksgiving. Most of the work I did in the shop, I did in the last 7 weeks or so. I was going to try to call you once it all started to make some sense. He paused, clearly trying to work out how to say what he had to say. But before I could do that, I had a little spill. It sent me headlong into something else entirely. He paused again. I've been under the impression that I was lost for a couple of days, but you said it was more like weeks? He frowned, turning that over in his mind. Grandpa had looked healthy, rosy even, but he said he was dehydrated, desperate for water and, of course, coffee. My last cup was some time ago, I guess, he said with a grin, as if that were the most unthinkable part of this whole ordeal. Well, let me show you what I know. I followed him down to the basement. There was some dirt on the floor, and the resonance engine we'd built together now sat on his workbench. The engine was at the heart of whatever was going on. We stumbled onto strange sound anomalies in and around town, and were trying to replicate them to figure out how they were strung together. The connections really started the day that I'd had my first real kiss with Liz Caldwell under Speechless Stewart's canopy. Grandpa had taken me on walks in the forest near where we'd assumed Grandma had vanished. Over time, I got to know the feeling of that place, the sound of it. Then, that day with Liz, when I was 13, at the South Fork, I noticed that the air had the same quality as Grandma's mushroom spot. I came home after the kiss, giddy and still gritty with goose flesh. I told Grandpa everything, the kiss, and the way that I could hear Liz's heartbeat over the chuckling of the stones in the water, and how it reminded me of our walking spot. Some of that could just be the kiss, you know. Powerful stuff, kisses. We went there together, and Grandpa agreed. It was peaceful and quiet, and the air was charged in the same inexplicable way. At the time, none of us knew that Jillian White's skull lay under the soil between Stewart's roots. From that point on, I started to pay attention, really listen to the way that sound behaved in places like this. Grandpa called them anomalies, but they weren't rare in Mill Creek. In fact, they were fixed in the town's history like punctuation marks. Stories of odd happenings, some beautiful, others horrifying, went back as far as anyone could remember. Grandpa and I made a project of tracking them down and mapping their locations. We pored over every written account we could find and talked to anyone willing to share. We told folks we were writing a book, which was kind of true, and it opened more doors than we expected. People were willing to talk for the most part. The Mill families hadn't sailed for smoother seas decades ago, despite the darkness and dysfunction, because the light was just as potent. Some places inspired awe, reverence, even worship. Other places hoarded stock in shocking horror and tragedy, but one thread connected them all: sound. We couldn't figure out how things fit together at first. The stories alone weren't enough. So we invested in some equipment: audio oscilloscopes, spectrograms, frequency analyzers, and studied the sound waves in earnest. By 1994, we started working with a new program called Logic from a company called eMagic. It let us record and analyze everything and save the data for later experiments. We thought we were chasing answers. Looking back, I wonder if it wasn't chasing us.
Thanks for listening to Waveglass. Written and read for you by Aaron Lewis Gibson. Copyright 2025. All rights reserved. No part of this podcast may be copied, shared, or rebroadcast without permission, except for brief excerpts used in reviews or commentary. If you're enjoying the ride, tell a friend, leave a review, or just hit subscribe. See you next time.